Tim.
You do have cell coverage out there.
Well, I had to go down the road away so I could actually get decent service.
Oh, okay.
So, no, I'm not on site at the moment.
All right, because I tried calling yesterday a couple times and didn't get anybody.
You can get out just enough to connect, but not enough to understand anybody. So it's really pointless.
Yeah, that explains it, because I was able to text yesterday, but I wasn't able to. So I was texting with Josh, but I wasn't able to call. So, Andy, when I spoke to Andy yesterday evening, he had a conversation with I'm drawing a blank. The guy in Texas that's putting that does
Scott Harvey, the CWI.
Scott Harvey.
Yes.
And Scott said he had to work on something else for somebody else real quick, but that he was going to get back to our stuff last night. He thought he only had about 20 more minutes worth of work to get that completed, and then he would be issuing us the required documentation.
That would be amazing.
My assumption is we're going to get that this morning. I talked to Andy. That was last night when I talked to Andy. I talked to Andy again about 15 minutes ago, and he was going to give Scott 15 more minutes, and then he was going to call him, and I reminded him that Scott's in Central Time, and it's 9:30, and I just call him. So anyway, so I trust that we are going to get that done. So at this point, I'm comfortable going ahead and having them weld, with the fact that we will have that documentation, by the time they're done with the welding today. So,
it would be amazing to get that documentation. I cannot proceed with welding until we get the documentation. That's why I was blowing your phone up the past few days, because I knew we were running out of time.
Yeah. The thing about this is, Mike, we've been using this method we used it for the last repair. And it's, the difference between the method that we're using and the method that is on the current documentation is just the difference between the 6010 and the 7018 rod. And I, thinking about this, honestly, I'd be a little concerned about using 6010 in that application anyway, just because you're going to have to be pretty careful. You're welding against the outside of the pipe with 6010 in a pressure situation. And 6010 is a much more aggressive rod as far as digging into the surface. And so my take on this is that we should have had something that had 7018, from the start. And I understand your concern about the fact that we've got a procedure that doesn't match the process we're using. But my take on this is that the process we're using is the correct process, and that the 6010 arguably is not a correct process.
Well,
if it were as simple as just using 6010, what I would be telling you is let's just go ahead and do it according to the procedure we have now with 6010 as the root bead. I'm not comfortable with that.
Correct.
So
we definitely need a procedure to reflect the 7018 all the way out in order to run that procedure.
And I agree with that completely. What I'm arguing with you about is I don't think it's worth holding up the welding when we know that the procedure we're using is the correct procedure, and we know that we've got paperwork coming that's going to show that.
Yes.
So
as soon as we get the documentation, we can weld. We cannot, by law, weld until we have a proper welding procedure.
Okay, well, you're the CWI, but I disagree with that. I would
on the common sense standpoint, I'm 100% on board with you, but the federal law requires these criteria, and there's no wiggle room. Just speaking bluntly, none of this should have ever happened with Andy being the project manager and the CWI. That was his job, was to procure proper well procedures, PQRs, and to validate them.
I get that too. So, yep.
So this is a major mess that is lying entirely at the feet of Andy, and it was 100% avoidable.
And I get that, but at the same time, I honestly, speaking real, continuing to speak real bluntly, I'm glad he was there. It should have been done right the first time, but I'm glad to have had his counsel about not using the 60-10 and using 70-18 all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I've looked into this a little bit more over the last couple of days, I think 60-10 would have been a mistake, and so I'm glad he was on board to tell us that hey, this is not the way this is done. The way he's been seeing that done through his whole career has been 70-18 all the way out. I'm glad that happened. Now the paperwork piece is obviously an error, and we need to have a failure in the process, and we need to have had that be corrected before this. But it's kind of coming back to your common sense thing. What we're moving to, or what we did on the last one, and what we're going to be doing on this one, is the right method to use. We just have to have the paperwork to back it up.
Right.
So, anyway.
So I'll be looking for.
He's talking to Scott. Based on what Scott had said last night, I can't imagine that we're not going to have that here shortly. How long is it going to be before they're ready to weld?
They were still pumping water, and they went ahead
there was water in the ditch?
Yes, after last night. So they were doing that.
Last night. Okay.
They got all that cleaned up.
Pictures last night didn't show any water, so.
After yesterday evening. And so they went ahead and opened the gate again, put mats across the ditch. I'll get you pictures for that. They were doing that this morning. Where we were using as a secondary parking, which was allowing us to not get in the landowner's field, we had to no longer use that parking area. So we were forced to return back to the original plans of opening the fence.
So what happened with the original?
It's a driveway. It looks like a.
Where were you using as a parking area?
There's a little driveway into an old, what I would call an old construction site. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's right across the street, maybe 40 yards down from where the gate entrance is at.
Oh, okay.
And so we just got lucky. Is really all it was.
I know what you're talking about. That used to, that piece across the street used to be a gravel pit.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I was talking to Robert Jones about that yesterday. So.
Yeah, there's. My understanding is there's some hunters back there today, and so we have not been booted off their parking, but they clearly expressed, we need to leave it open.
Yeah.
So we can park like 4 vehicles there, and then.
So you're talking about down and to the east of the property. Yeah, that's a driveway back into an old gravel pit. There's actually a lake back there.
Okay.
They dug all the gravel out.
Yeah. So we can park some of our vehicles there, and then they went ahead and had to put mats to get the welding trucks and the sleeve trailer.
A space, and then there's a gate back there, so you were using that space before the gate?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So that's what they're doing now, but I will be looking for that documentation, and hopefully it'll be coming in here shortly.
All right,
thank you. I'm assuming it's going to get uploaded to Box, or am I going to get a text? Am I looking for a text from you?
It's going to get uploaded to Box, but you're going to get a text either from me or from Andy saying that it's uploaded to Box, because you're probably not going to be able to get it from there, right? You're going to have to drive back out to get it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you'll get a text message. If you haven't got a text message, and they're getting close to welding, you need to drive back out, just in case it's a communications error and we can't get to you.
What I will probably be doing is touching base with them and trying to make sure that I have signal. So I'm going to try to limit the no signal on my end.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get this screwed up by
not
being able we get a text or something from us. So
Yeah, no, I want to make sure I have service.
I got to get back on it. Rhonda also asked me for the remaining life calculation on this thing after I decided that we needed to fix it. And that's actually a bit scary. It depends on, one of the problems with remaining life calculations is you need to know how fast it's growing, right? How fast it's growing. In the absence of information, NACE requires that the NACE doesn't require anything, but NACE suggests that you use a pitting rate of 0.15, it's actually 0.16 inches per year. And the problem with that is that number would yield a failure point about 2.5 years from now.
Oh yeah, that's still good. Does the coding not stop it?
But it's because of the, that's if we had not done anything. That's if we'd have just opened this thing up and said, okay, put the same shrink sleeve back on, backfill the damn thing.
Right.
The fact that that we were going to sandblast it would have seriously, reduced that number. But how much would it have reduced the number is the question. And my argument is that 2.5 years is too short, regardless of what you decrease that number to. I mean, that's we're down to a fairly small safety factor with that pit. So,
right.
My other concern is that the MAOP is 1420 on that line, and if that stress concentration tomography stuff is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it's not, they've been using it a lot in Europe, it showed 82% of yield on this thing, of SMICE, on stress concentration for this thing, which if you flip that around and you say, okay, what's 82% if you flip that around and you say, what's that give me for since that was based on 115 or 1115 psi the day they were taking the test, the stress concentration stuff.
Yes.
If you divide that by the 0.82, you get a number that's less than the MAOP of the pipe. And so I don't think it's good judgment not to fix this thing. And so
for sure. Last question: is this still
kind of being required to justify that?
Yeah, anyway. Is this still natural gas flowing through this line, or are we on a different?
Oh yeah, it's all going to be natural gas.
Okay.
Through the lines, all the way through.
I had assumed that, but I just wanted to double check there.
Yeah, no, there's no. The only place you get into situations where you get anything that's not natural gas, there are a few places. I mean, West Texas, New Mexico more than West Texas. There are a few other spots, I think, now that we've started doing more of the shale plays. But about the only thing you ever see flowing through a pipe besides natural gas is, unless you get into liquids, but besides natural gas would be CO2. And the only place that occurs is New Mexico, West Texas. I think there might be a transmission line for it that runs, down partway into Texas, but there's none of that in Arkansas, Oklahoma, through that whole area. So,
okay. Yeah, I was just curious there.
Yeah, so the only thing, that you can see a little bit difference on is there's natural gas and there's natural gas, right? So you've got processed gas and you've got unprocessed gas. Unprocessed gas has a bit higher, not a lot, but a bit higher specific gravity, and it has a little more heavy hydrocarbons in it. So it changes some things like measurement kind of issues. I mean, the change in specific gravity requires some changes in measurement. Requires a change in supercompressibility factor if you're running high pressures like we are when you go to look at the measurement on it. So that's about it. I mean, theoretically, it would change, like for your stuff on welding. Right. Theoretically, that it would increase the amount of heat that is being drawn off the bottom of the weld, when they're welding through the pipe wall. But it's going to be on the order of 2 or 3%. It's going to be insignificant. So.
Right. Well, fair enough. Alrighty, thank you for explaining that, and I'll be looking forward to the text from one of y'all.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, thank you.